Today is the holiday that's called Thanksgiving. Although one cannot imagine a Frum Yid taking part in the holiday, for example, of Xmas, that we understand is not just a secular holiday, it has to do with Avodah Zarah. However, over the years, there were and there are many families that take part in Thanksgiving. To some extent, more or less, that take part of Thanksgiving. In today's Shiur, we're going to discuss two nakudas in Thanksgiving. One is the halachically taking part, is it permissible? And then in general, eating turkey, the shaila about eating turkey in general, not only today, all around the whole year. So let's first start about the general shaila, eating turkey in general. The Torah, when the Torah mentions the kashrus of behema chayiv v'oif, a behema has simoni tahara. When it comes to a oif, the Torah goes through the oifes hatameis. It's in Parsha Shemini and Vayikra, and it's also in Re'ei and Devarim. Rashi explains why does the Torah list out the oifes hatameis, which come out to be 24. Why does the Torah say all of them? So Rashi says, it's from a Gemara in Chulin. Rashi says that these are the 24 that are tamei, and they're merubah, the ones that are tahirim, which means anything besides the 24 oifes hatameis are tar, which means there are more, obviously there's more oifes tahiris than tameis. If not, the Torah would list out the tahiris. Over here I have a list of different birds that are tar, which lists 30. It could be these even more, but just to have someone who makes a mention of the birds, 30 birds. So that's already more than the ones the Torah speaks about, the tameis. There's more tahiris than tameis. And the Shulchan Aruch Taken Yeridea, Shulchan Aruch Yeridea Siman Pei Beis Sif Aleph, the Shulchan Aruch says that there are 24 oifes tameis, and anything else is tar. Which means if you know which oifes are the 24 that are tamei, any other bird that you find, anything that's in the oifes family, is mutter to eat. The problem, however, is that we don't exactly know which are the 24 that are tameis. We just don't know. Of course, the Torah says the names, but we don't know the names that the Torah says. We don't know exactly which those 24 are. Therefore, we have to rely on what the Messiah is. And the Shulchan Aruch actually says that he's also a eitzah how to know, based on what the Torah says, the 24 that are tamei, there are simonim to know which are tar. The ikr that it's not a doiris. There are another 3 simonim also, which we're not going to focus now on the simonim, but there are simonim to know. By a behema, the Torah says, ma'ala geru mafrisa parasa, the Torah gives us simonim. By oifes, the Torah doesn't give us simonim. The Torah just says 24 that are tamei. Besides those 24, everything else is tar. But we can make a cheshbon from those 24. Everything else that's not a doiris and the other simonim are going to be tar. Lamaisa, the Shulchan Aruch, and the Ikar de Ramah concludes in Sif Gimel over there in Sif Beis, in Siman Pei Beis, Sif Gimel. The Ramah says, I'll read the Lashon, V'yesh Oimrim, Shein lisma chafil al zeh, which means on the simonim of which are tar. Ve'ein lechol shum oif el b'mesorah shekiblu boy shu tar. You could only eat birds that have a mesorah. Any of the oifes family that we have a mesorah, which we know about, mesorah that it's tar, those you could eat. Any others, even if they have the simoni tahara, you can't eat them. V'chein noyegim ve'ein l'shanois. That's the Lashon Shulchan Aruch. And the Aruch HaShulchan says, Chalila lahater b'loi mesorah. There's a shaila about this Ramah, and the Aruch HaShulchan says, Chalila, to rely and eat without a mesorah. So the question is, the turkey, the pashtus, was discovered in America. When Columbus discovered America in 1492, with discovering America, he discovered the turkey. And the reason it's called turkey, Hoidu, is because they thought it actually, when he came to America, he thought it was India. And therefore they named it based on Hoidu, or even, they thought that it was that he landed up in India, so that's why they called it that name. But Al Kapanim, it was discovered at that time. That's when they discovered the turkey. So the question is, how do we eat the turkey? Never, not even for today, any day of the year. How do we eat the turkey? L'chayrid no Messiah was already discovered a couple hundred years ago, which means that we didn't know before, we didn't have this in the past. And if we didn't have it in the past, he's no Messiah, how could he eat it? These many yeshuvim, could be these even more that I put together, but there's actually 6 answers to this, how we could eat turkey. And we'll go through one by one. Some are a little bit questionable, but let's bring and discuss all of the explanations how we eat turkey, even though there's no Messiah. The first teretz is in the Shalom Meshiv, Medura Hey Chelik Aleph, the Nachal Eshkol brings it, and the Darkei Tshuva brings it as well. The Shulchan Aruch, as we mentioned, says that if there are simonim, you can rely on the simonim. So he says, since we know that turkey has a simonim, it's not a doiris, and it has the other simonim, which means how it splits the fingers, and the other simonim the Shulchan Aruch speaks about, you can rely on the simonim, which really means technically not like the Ramah. The Ramah says you have to rely on Messiah. They say, you know how we eat the turkey? Because there are simoni kashrus on the turkey, which really, that's technically a little bit of a hard, not such a clear answer, because Lamaisa the Ramah says you have to be Saimach, you have to have a Messiah. So if you don't have Messiah, technically you can't eat it. So really, the bottom line over here would be is that if the Ramah says you need Messiah, you shouldn't be able to eat the turkey. But that's the first answer. They say it has simonim, and since it has simonim, you can eat it. Very good, Rabbi Shiur. That's the second yishuv, which technically, Pashtus, that means that there is a Messiah, but the second yishuv, Rabbi Shiur is pointing out very good, and it's Tziva Meshiv Dava says this answer, and he says like this: since now, right now, if the shayla is now, could we eat it or not? Since people are eating it for many years already, for hundreds of years, he says Chalila to say that when they ate it a oif tameh. So Mamela, it's chashav as if we have a Messiah. It believes like we have a Messiah. The first teretz really is that you can rely on simoni tahara. It has simonim, which really means is without a Messiah. The Netziv says that it's considered we have a Messiah, which is a chiddush to some extent, because Lamaisa, technically we know it came without a Messiah. It was discovered a few hundred years ago. But the teretz is for us right now. The question is, Tafshinayin Ches, can we eat right now? Can we eat turkey? The teretz is, since Doiris are eating the turkey, so Meilat has a Messiah and you can eat it.
There's a combination between the first teretz and the second teretz. The wet, like the Shukador without their law. How did they start eating then? But now, since they're eating it for many years, it's eating the feed of their law. It's like a Messiah.
No, the Messiah, the Shulchan Aruch brings the simonim, and then the Shulchan Aruch says that no, you cannot. Ve'ein lismach al elu on the simonim, and you have to have a Messiah. Lamaisa, just to point out that enochanami taka in this second answer that now we have a Messiah, avad it has to be like he says Chalila to say that they ate oif tameh, and which means enochanami. Then the taka relied not like the Ramah, but all you have to understand from this second teretz is a chiddush. That even though it started off, so to speak, call it shaloi kedin, because Lamaisa, the Ramah says you have to rely on Messiah. Since now, Avada, it started off taka because Lamaisa is simonim, but now we have a Messiah, we could eat it.
We know that that's how it started off. The first people that ate kosher turkey in America, how do we know that they began eating it thinking only siman? Maybe they thought it was similar to a bird that they knew from wherever they came from, that they had any siman. You know that they're starting with like kedin.
How do you know that they started kedin?
To us, we seem that when we grow up, turkeys all over the world, not only here. They raise turkeys elsewhere. I mean, I don't know the history of the turkey, but
If the technically,
close enough to something else that they have in Sarah, unless they rely on the second one. Just assume it. I don't know.
you're asking that then when they ate it, it could be.
Turkey here. Saying maybe he started like it. Maybe that wasn't his fetish. Maybe it wasn't about someone. Maybe his fetish was that it was related to another bird that he knew about.
That's fine. Or he relied on simanim. Just a second. You're right. But it says the Netziv Chalila to say that they ate oif tameh. For whatever the cheshbon is. Agreed. You're saying maybe that they thought the simonim or they thought it was a different oif lamaisa. You can rely on it because Chalila. And just 1 second, in Shiles and Shuvas Tzemach Tzedek also he says, Ubakame Yoris bebidinascha minik poshet la'oichlam ef shaloimer dehavaleika Messiris. In other words, by Klal Yisrael just doing it, that is considered a Messiah. It's still questionable again how they did it in the beginning, and we'll see if we're going to get clarification on that. Let's move on to the other yeshuvim. Yes, Shragi. So the truth is, let's see the other yeshuvim also. But you're right. At this point, it's not completely added. It's not completely shragi. It's not completely a made-up thing to say it was discovered in America. But let's move on to other tirutzim, and I'll see. It could be it was not. But the pashtus was that it was, and that's why they celebrate with Turkey because it was discovered in America. That's the pashtus through history. The third yishuv. What were we saying, Rabbi Shia? I'm sorry. Okay, we're gonna get to Pri Shulchan Aruch also. We'll get to that in a minute. That's actually Yishuv number 6. We'll see in the years. Let's get to it. Slow, one thing at a time. So Nachum, what we have over here, either they did taka no Messiah, or now we have a Messiah. The next Yishuv is the Arugas Aboisim Rabbi Aryeh Bul Chaver, not the Arugas Aboisim, the Tzelem is a third teretz. He says the reason why you can't rely on simonim, the main siman is that it's not a doiris. So he says, if you have a bird and you look at it and you watch it and it's not doiris, it's very nice it wasn't doiris, but maybe in a few weeks it'll be doiris. You can't be for sure that it's not doiris. You can't be positive about it. But he says, this is what he says, but since this turkey was neskadel in the houses of Yidin, la lofim by the thousands, by the tens of thousands, and we see for many years that it's not doiris, Yitaka can rely on the simonim. In other words, this that the Ramah says not to rely on simonim is only because it's not foolproof. Why is it not foolproof? Because maybe it's taka not doiris. But maybe it is doiris, I'm sorry. But if we see for so many years and these chickens, the turkeys in so many Yiddish houses, we could assume that it's not doiris. I mean, you could taka rely on simonim. Yitaka don't need a Messiah. That was Hezber number 3. Number 4. In Shailas Tshuvas Meir Be'er, the Darkei Tshuva brings this as well. And he says that there actually is a Messiah. And we spoke before, when was the turkey from, which technically it's written that it was discovered in America. The Shailas Tshuvas Meir Be'er, the Darkei Tshuva brings it, that he says that there's a Messiah on the turkey from Anshe India, from Hoidu. He writes, Anshe India Hoidu, Kabbalah from Moshe Rabbeinu. That's what he writes. It's a Kabbalah on the turkey with Moshe Rabbeinu. And he says there was a question during the Doiris, I don't know when, but there was a question if Taka, their Messiah is a good Messiah. And Lamaisa, he says that they were Machriya that Anshe India are Yereim v'Shleimim, and you can rely on their Messiah. Which means these Taka Messiah on the turkey. I'm not an historian. I don't know, but I'm just saying the pashtus, the turkey we know was discovered. We'll see others that speak about it also in the years. We'll get to it in a minute. Pashtus, it was discovered when we came to America. You're right. He says that Ataka was earlier, and the Ataka is a Messiah. And this is actually brought. Someone mentioned before about with the Svar. They bring it with the Kafachayim. Zef Chetzedek was also a Svar the Shapoisek. They also bring this. The taka, there is a Messiah. The taka is a Messiah on turkey. We can eat turkey because he's a Messiah. These others that want to say maybe it's a different yishuv, but others want to say that this turkey is even mentioned in the Yerushalmi. The Yerushalmi in Brachas Peira Gimel Halacha Hey, Tosfos brings in Brachas Tav Chav Hey that the halacha is you have to be marchik from a tzoyas tarnagol edoim dalar amas ketzoyas adam. Because Lamaisa, that soya smells much more, you have to move Dalar Amas. And the Bach and the Magen Avram say that this Tarnagol Edom is Indik, which is the turkey. So technically, seemingly, when it's mentioned over there, is already before Churban Bayis. So it has a pretty early Mesorah. This would be Yishuv number 4, that is Taka Mesorah. You could argue maybe that it's Taka not the turkey, but seemingly from there that if it is the turkey and the turkey is already mentioned early, comes out that it's way back to turkey and is Taka Mesorah. The 5th Yishuv is brought in Dvar Alocha, Rabbi Leo Klatskin, which was the Rav and Lablim before Meir Shapiro. And he says a very big chiddush. He says that any bird, that it's not a new bird that we discover. In other words, it's part of a different family, then you don't need a Mesorah. You don't need a Mesorah. You only need a Mesorah if we'll discover a type of oif that's a new type of oif. It's not the same bird, it just looks a little different. Only in such a case do you need a Mesorah. If you find if it's something that's included, it's technically the same as a different one, but Chahai Gavni, you don't need a Mesorah. You don't need a Mesorah. So Mela the turkey, technically we have Bedoima to such, it's Bedoima, and Mela you don't need a Mesorah. You don't need a Mesorah. Which really, this is a very big chiddush. There was a very big shaila recently on the chicken in Eretz Yisrael. All the Gedolim were donning about it. The barkel chicken, which technically is really a chicken like a different chicken. It looks a little different, which pashtus is really included in other family chickens that we have a Mesorah on. But Lamaisa, that's the Dvar Alachas Yishuv, that's something that's included in what we have a Mesorah, you could eat it. So Mamela, the turkey we could eat because it's included, and Mamela, it's like we have the Mesorah on that also. The 60... It's more of a, you're saying it's more of a recent shaila. Yeah. The sixth and final Yishuv is brought in Oitzi Yisrael, and this is the cheshbon that somebody mentioned with the years, to make a cheshbon like this. The turkey, the Ramah, this is the cheshbon like this. The Ramah was nifter in Shin Lamed Gimel, which is 1573. 1573. The Ramah was nifter, was 33 when he was nifter. The Mele, if you make the cheshbon, he was nifter when he was 33. And the turkey was discovered in 1492. So Mamela, like this. Before we mentioned that once people start doing it, like Shragi said, let me start the Mesorah now. Once people do it, it's fine, it's okay. It's like we have a Mesorah. Now we're saying something else. It was enforced, or the din was hukva, that you have to have a Mesorah. This halacha of the Ramah is when the Ramah brought it in Shulchan Aruch. The Ramah was nifter again in 1573. Somewhere within the 33 years of his life is when he wrote it. And the turkey was already before. So Mamela, Avada, they ate it. They started eating the turkey beheter, so to speak, Alpida Simonim. And then afterwards, once they started eating a beheter, Mamela, you don't eat a Mesorah. In other words, anything that started before the Ramah said about having a Mesorah, you could continue eating. So the turkey started... We started eating turkey before the Ramah wrote that you have to have a Mesorah. So Mela, you could continue eating it even though it started without a Mesorah. Avad it's based. It's a big shaila in the Rishonim. Avad is thing, but Zetzachos, if you could say that the Ramah was the one who brought it Lamaisa Allah. He was machriya between the Machlekes Rishonim. Avad wasn't the Ramah's chiddush, 100%. So it comes out we have over here 6 yeshuvim on how we eat turkey, even though either you don't need a Mesorah, or since we're noig like that, it's like now we have a Mesorah. Since it's vaday ein adoris, you don't need a Mesorah. There is a Mesorah. It's nichlal and other ones that have a Mesorah, or we've been eating it before. We've been eating it before the halach of Mesorah. Lamaisa, I think it's fair to say roiv of Klal Yisrael, ruba de ruba eat taka the turkey. Lamaisa and Archas Rabbeinu bring the Chazanish, the Stipler, ate turkey. Me'idach, there are those taka that don't eat turkey. Shmuel Kamenetsky says over his father, Rabbi Yaakov, didn't eat turkey. It's interesting to note that Rabbi Yaakov didn't eat because Shver didn't eat. Upon him, we see here these many yeshuvim how you can eat turkey. Rabbi Shmuel himself doesn't eat, and he says it's b'tayras chumrah, but the way it's brought is that Lamaisa's kids do eat because you could go with the mother's minig, but Lamaisa, Shmuel said that he doesn't eat. That's what it's brought down, that he doesn't eat b'tayras chumrah. Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, his father, Rabbi Yaakov didn't eat. So we have that's so far Turkey in general. Now we'll try to discuss today, eating turkey today. Is there any issue of eating turkey today? And then we'll try to discuss 4 different scenarios. One is about obviously eating turkey today. Another one is to join in a Thanksgiving celebration. For somebody to make their own Thanksgiving celebration, and even just making simchas. Like Morty said, he has a chasada tonight. We'll try to discuss all 4. Some of it is not so clear, halacha l'maisa, and a very clear disclaimer, I'm not a posek, not here, not in anything else. But here in particular, it's not even very clear in between the few tshuvas of Rav Moshe, but it's just to bring it up, to discuss, to be ma'orer a person, whether if he's celebrating, not celebrating, to know that he's a shaila about it, and to know that he's a discussion. The first thing we'll speak about is the last one, about making a simcha on a day of Thanksgiving. So Rav Moshe Netshuva brings that on a day of a holiday, let's say like Xmas, that has to do with Avodah Zarah, so that he says, to make the simcha b'dafka on that day, that's aser medina. And even if it just happens to fall out, you didn't realize, a person should really not do that mipnei marasayin. Now that's obviously only a simcha that you don't have to have it that day. He says a wedding, you don't have to do it the day of the legal holiday. And the same is also a bar mitzvah, which is interesting. Maybe you would think you want to do it by Bayoy, but he says a bar mitzvah, let's say a siyam, something that doesn't have to be. But avada, pidyon, aben, a bris that you have to do that day, even if it falls out December 25th, of course you do it that day, you don't push it off. But then he says, Lamaisa, he says Thanksgiving, and it's interesting enough, he also says about New Year's. New Year's, one could really question maybe that it's also to do with Avodah Zarah, but he puts that together with Thanksgiving, which means it's more a secular, just to celebrate a holiday, not to do with Avodah Zarah. You can look up the Tshuvah, it's in Even Ezer, Chelik Beis, Siman Yud Gimel. And he says, Ein lesser Medina, you can't aser to make a wedding, or any simcha that doesn't have to bedafka be today. But he says, Lamaisa bal nefesh yesh lahachmer. Bal nefesh yesh lahachmer. I spoke to Rabbi Bluth yesterday to get a little bit clarity on the few tshuvas of Rav Moshe. So he said, in the understanding of al nefesh yesh lahachmer, he said that he says, not that Rav Moshe said it, but he said, the big Talmud of Rav Moshe, and he said that Rav Moshe would be maskim b'chahai gavana, that there's no halls, and you only have a hall then. So that's called a matzav of, so to speak, b'shas atchak. Of course you could. So even if somebody's taka makes a chasana, it's not only not the end of the world. If there's no hall, a person can make the simcha then also. That's lagabi. The first shaila, actually, which we numbered it for, about making a simcha on a day like today. Now we'll try to get into the celebrating Thanksgiving. So Rabbi Shana Tshuva, this is an Archaim Chelak Heisim and Chaf Oiz Vav. In that Tshuva he says that it's Aser Medina, it's Aser to celebrate it. Now we'll try to move on to see on other Tshuvas to get a bit of clarity. He says it's Aser Medina, but not like those that want to say that the Isser of celebrating is the Isser of Avodah Zarah. Morty Taka showed it to me inside. He gets a daily email from Rabbi Miller, and I already saw it brought others say it as well. He said that's written from a recording of his. Rabbi Victor Miller says that celebrating Thanksgiving is Avodah Zarah. It's even Yaharek Val Yaver, but it goes into a question of Avodah Zarah, which is Aser al Avodah Zarah. Rav Moshe writes that it's Aser Medina, and Rav Moshe writes not al Avodah Zarah. He says whoever says that it's Avodah Zarah doesn't really understand the Indian, has nothing to do with Avodah Zarah. And he says, even if you'll tell me that the ones in the beginning days celebrating Thanksgiving were Oivdei Avodah Zarah, and they used to give a thanks to their Avodah Zarah, but that's not the essence of the holiday. And even now, people celebrate it, nothing to do with Avodah Zarah. They don't talk about Avodah Zarah. Yeah, it's a regular, it's enjoyment. So Mela, it's nothing to do with Avodah Zarah.
Yeah, but Xmas also, there's nothing really anymore.
So Lamaisa, Xmas is based off, it's a holiday of Avodah Zarah. It's not, this was based off giving a thanks. Elamai, you're telling me that some were doing thanks to Avodah Zarah. Lamaisa, that's not what the holiday is. And now no one does. It's a Mela. He says that's Avodah Zarah wouldn't be a problem. But he says there's another Isser. He says, the Torah says in Kedoshim, which this is a very big shmuz ariches. If it goes into what exactly goes in? But you're not allowed to go in their ways. And the Mela, their ways is to celebrate Thanksgiving. So Mela, there's a lav. He says there's an Isser. Towards the end of the tshuva, he brings a Tosfos. Towards the end of the tshuva, he says, "V'gam be'isser zeh eino barer." Just reading the words of what he says in the tshuva. First he says that it's mamash alav, and then he says, "V'gam be'isser zeh eino barer." But this is speaking about making a Thanksgiving party. What's about joining? You get invited, your friend's making a Thanksgiving party. Could you go? Could you join? So these are another two tshuvas of Ramosha, and this is where it gets a bit confusing to understand clearly, but these are Ramosha in Yeridei Dalid. He says, Loi matzinu bazeh iser lav basiya simcha besuda, and not eating turkey. There's also V'loi bachilas turkey, which means tarnagol. To eat turkey, which was our first shaila, that's not a problem. Which really, if somebody doesn't celebrate Thanksgiving, but it happens to be it's on sale and you have turkey, you can make it, there's no problem. There's a whole discussion in the Poskim that if they decide to make something out of food, it doesn't answer us on food. So the turkey, that we're going to leave out on the side. Turkey, to eat turkey, Shaloi L'Shem, celebrating just to have turkey is fine. However, this is important what he says, and this comes out pretty clear between the two tshuvas, to be koiveya, that you have to do it, that there's a chayiv to do to celebrate Thanksgiving, to make it a kviyas, that he says you're not allowed to do. Means to do it here and there, spontaneous, even if it's not only going to be one time, you're going to do it even more than 1 year. But if you do it b'teiras agav, not because you're mechuyev to do it, just why not? It's a day off, and even though you're doing it on Thanksgiving, he says, l'chayra comes out that it wouldn't be a problem, not ba'ofen kavua, but ba'ofen kavua he says that's for sure aser. What does it mean not ofen kavua? That he says either to skip, and he says even skipping is also you should be machmer. So just to come out a clarity in what's maybe, so to speak, not so clear, if to do it ba'ofen kavua, which means a yearly thing, somebody has it set in his calendar, that Moshe sees no heter. But to do it here and there once in a while, which means you don't do it ba'ofen kavua, which I also saw of Henkin says, such type of words, that if you skip years, that would be fine. And Lamaisa still Rav Moshe says, Min aroi lahachmer, and Rav Hutner is known also to be very against it. So just to conclude what we have over here, we spoke, the first part of the shiur was be'ikr about eating the turkey in general. And then we spoke about Thanksgiving, whether to make a simcha, bal nefesh roi lahachmer, and then in celebrating it, ba'ofen kavua is for sure aser. Taking part, you have to see Rav Moshe inside. One place he says maybe it would be an isser, maybe not an isser. So it's maybe not so clear. That's at least a person should come out that it's not fully clear what ba'ofen if it's mutter aser. Have a wonderful day.